Joining us this morning live from the White House is the Director of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, Peter Navarro. Peter, it's good to have you back. Good morning.
Great to be here with you.
We use those words, cooling trade tensions. Is that how you would put it today?
I would say that we're doing a great job here at the White House, putting forth President Trump's vision of growth. President Trump's a builder. And if I may, before we talk trade, I want to talk about
Sure.
like the four major building blocks of the global economy that we're trying to achieve here. First of all, we have the historic tax cuts that President Trump has orchestrated. And what we're going to see in 2018 and 2019 is a tremendous wave of investment in this country that's going to lead to high productivity growth. And so we'll get in non-inflationary economic growth on the wings of the tax policy. We have over at the Office of Management and Budget the architect of our deregulation move, historic, dating back to Reagan. We've never seen anything quite like this under President Trump's vision and direction. And that's a pure supply side stimulus that's non-inflationary and pure growth inducing. So that's going on, and it will continue through 2018. The third point of the compass and a building block is lower energy prices. President Trump has unleashed the energy sector. That means lower costs, higher competitiveness for our manufacturers, as well as lower consumer costs. And then when we get to the trade building block, we made great progress so far without having tensions, as you say. For example, in January, President Trump instituted tariffs on solar panels and washing machines. And what we got out of that was not tensions, but we got a flood of new investment into those industries here. So we have American factories building washing machines with American hands. So that's all good. And then we're renegotiating both the Korea deal, which is one of the worst deals ever done. And if it looks like we're going to have a very, very good result on that, thanks to two people, President Trump himself, as well as Ambassador Robert Lighthizer, who's like the tough, smart negotiator that President Trump promised to appoint. And it looks like we might get a really good deal on NAFTA as well for the American people. So we're making great progress. Now, when you turn to the China issue, I think everyone on set would agree with the premise that China has engaged for a very long time in the theft of our intellectual property, as well as practices like forced technology transfer. Ambassador Lighthizer and Secretary Mnuchin, at the president's direction and personal direction, they are talking with the Chinese, as we've been doing since day one, and we will continue to do that. And I think we're hopeful there that China will work with us to basically address some of these practices. So I see nothing but bullish signs ahead. We've got four building blocks of a very strong economy. We've got a global growth, synchronized growth pattern going on, Europe and Asia. And so from an investor's point of view, just looking at that plus the economic indicators themselves, it's extremely strong. ISM Manufacturing Index above 60, consumer confidence off the charts, business confidence. So to me, we're doing what we need to do.
And to your point, Peter, the markets responded to all of those things. Tax cuts, we took us straight to those January highs, but it was the introduction of those tariffs, or at least the notion of tariffs, that has created some of this chop. And I'm wondering, what's the earliest you could deliver some assurances, the way the Secretary said he was hopeful for, that these tariffs might be forestalled?
Well, let me push back a little bit about on the chop. Last week was an interesting week because we also had the Fed chairman talking about an interest rate cycle that looks to be going up. I would say to that, everything we're doing in terms of stimulus is also non-inflationary, where you have the tax cuts that lead to more investment and productivity. That means growth without inflation. So that was going on. All I can tell you now is that Ambassador Lighthizer and the Secretary of Treasury are actively engaged with the Chinese. And Ambassador Lighthizer, this man is he's a wonderful asset to this country and to the president. under the direction of the president. He's negotiating with the Koreans, he's negotiating with the Chinese, he's negotiating with Mexico and Canada, and this is the way it should be. You kind of wonder why it took a president like Donald Trump to come in and do all these things, but the bottom line is President Trump has the courage and vision to tackle this structural imbalance that we have in trade around the world. And I think we're doing great things, and I think the move to 25,000 on the Dow is reflective of that.
Yeah, Peter, I want to ask about the WTO. What happens if the World Trade Organization pushes back on this administration's trade approach? The WTO is less than 25 years old. Is it expendable in this administration's view?
Look, the World Trade Organization, and President Trump has been very clear on this. There's over 160 countries in there, and we have not been treated fairly in things like dispute resolution, which Ambassador Lighthizer is an expert in, and just the way the whole system works. It's simply unfair and not reciprocal for China to charge 25% tariffs on autos, and then when they export cars to us, ours is only 2.5%. We have the similar kinds of problems with Europe. What President Trump is trying to do is usher in a whole new era of fair, free, and reciprocal trade. And if we can get the WTO to embrace that, well, we would love to have the WTO embrace those principles. But right now, the WTO has rules which actually work against that. Things like the most favored nation clause, which allows for these non-reciprocal tariffs. It's just wrong. So what needs to happen is the WTO needs to change with the times. We want to be part of that in terms of doing it constructively. And I think that if we can get to an era where President Trump's vision wants to take us to a world where we move from now, we have massive trade imbalances driven by unfair and non-reciprocal trade, to a world where we have free and fair trade, where trade is balanced with the help of the WTO. That's the vision where we're going to. And if anybody can do it, I can tell you, it's the man behind me in that house.
Peter, you mentioned the washing machine and solar tariffs, and certainly when we look at aluminum and steel tariffs and now broader potential tariffs on China, how much of this is about sort of narrowing that trade deficit versus encouraging companies, U.S. or foreign, to invest more here stateside?
Well, one of the benefits of imposing these tariffs has been new foreign direct investment in the country, but the goal really depends on what the target is. For example, with the aluminum and steel industries, let's be very clear about that. The president says correctly that we can't have a country without an aluminum and steel industry, and there's 20 countries flooding this market with steel and 15 countries flooding it with aluminum, and those industries here domestically need defense from that for national security purposes. So that's the purpose there. With, for example, the 201 with the solar panels and washing machines, that was an action taken because of an unfair import surge. And the 301, we do a lot of numbers here, but the 301 investigation by Ambassador Lighthizer was directed specifically at the unfair and burdensome practices related to China's acquisition of our intellectual property and our technologies in ways which are very counterproductive to a free market economy. So the purpose of anything we do here is fair and reciprocal trade. That's the president's vision, and it's very growth oriented. I want to emphasize to investors, every day that President Trump comes to work, he's trying to figure out two things: how to make this economy grow and how to put men and women in America to work in manufacturing jobs. And look, the first year of his administration is one of the most successful, not in just modern history, but in history. And he needs to get credit for that, and he hasn't been given appropriate credit.
Prime Minister May says she welcomes the temporary exemption given to the EU over steel and aluminum, but needs to be made permanent. How likely is that?
Let me be very clear about the exemptions, the temporary exemptions that are be given to a select amount of countries. by necessity, if you're going to be defending your aluminum and steel industries, any country that winds up exempt from the tariffs will have to also have some kind of restriction, likely a quota, in order to defend our domestic industries. So we are engaged, and it's Robert Lighthizer, the USTR, who's the head of this, with the president, engaged in trying to figure out ways where we can work with our allies and partners in a way which accomplishes both their goals and ours. So let's see what happens. May 1's the deadline for that. And I think that we can come to some very nice accommodations with all of our partners. We're friends and allies, but we want fair and reciprocal trade while we defend key industries like aluminum and steel.
Right. And one last time, Peter, for investors who are looking for a timeline on those deliverables, you think we could get something out of these negotiations, say, in a month? In 6 weeks?
This is not for me to say. It's up to Ambassador Lighthizer, Secretary Mnuchin, and the President to release that information. All I can tell you and provide assurances, very strong assurances, to the investors watching this program is that we are actively engaged, and our goal is growth and stability and fair and reciprocal trade, and that's where we're going.
Peter, we always appreciate you coming on the show, whether it's with Santelli or with us. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
All right. Great to talk to you.
Peter Navarro.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.